Hello, welcome to Meet the Author, sponsored by Author Event Network in partnership with the Bremerton Public Access Television. I'm your host, Guy Morris. Author Event Network is a nonprofit association of local authors who sign books at local festivals, fairs, and events. Our guest today is Karen Eisenbrey. Hi Karen, how you doing?
Hi Guy, I'm doing great.
You know, I've been excited to talk to you. You've been one of our oldest and earliest members of the AEN group, and so excited to have you here today.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
We're going to start with some generic questions. Tell us first about tell our audience about what inspired you to write.
Well, I've always loved stories for as long as I can remember. And I liked writing them as soon as I found out that that was something you could do. So, third grade or whatever, we started writing stories. Wow. And then as I got older, I was reading more and more, reading a lot of fantasy and science fiction, and probably in high school, I got the idea of, people write books. I could write books. Wouldn't that be neat? And I took a long time to do it because what I discovered was I was pretty good at the technical part. I knew how to format dialogue, and I knew how to write a sentence, and I could string them together into paragraphs, but I didn't know how to have good ideas. Mm-hmm. But, that dream stayed there until I did start having ideas.
Well, I think that's actually true. I think for a lot of authors, I'm surprised when I see authors that are very young, because my first impression, and I think maybe that comes from my own experience as well, which is, so what is it that they think they have to write about? That's it. They haven't lived life yet. They haven't really experienced much yet. What is it that's really compelling them to have a compelling story to write about? And for my own life, I think that waiting later in life to become a writer gave me more substance, and I think that that's true for a lot. Well, tell us about the genres that you write and why you chose those particular genres.
I think they chose me, but I write wizard fantasy, so the Daughter of Magic trilogy is that. I write superhero, teen superheroes, which is the St. Rage series. Okay. And then I have one space adventure, a science fiction novel, which is Ego and Endurance. Okay. So kind of across the board speculative fiction.
Excellent, excellent. Now, I remember once you described one of your books as Josie and the Pussycats meets the Avengers.
Yeah, that's these, especially this one. It's a garage rock superhero mashup set in Seattle. Teenagers with weird powers, and they're also in a band.
I can see why you're popular. That would go far in Seattle. Now, what do you consider the key themes of your books? And if there's different themes, let's talk about each of them.
Yeah, well, the same themes keep coming up. It seems to be the power of friendship and collaboration and finding your people. Finding yourself and finding your people in that. And
finding your tribe.
Not trying to go it alone, but finding what makes you special and what your talents are, but then surrounding yourself with the people that will make that happen.
Oh, interesting. And so what do you think the struggles are if that is a theme? For most people, what do you think we struggle with in terms of finding our tribe? Why is that so hard?
A lot of my characters, and this was my experience too, are kind of weirdos, for want of a better word. Barbara, in these books, begins the story, she's invisible. She has no friends. She hasn't found her people. She literally can't be seen because she has drawn into herself so far, and she has superpowers that she doesn't know about, and so she's invisible. Until she meets...
physically invisible.
Physically invisible. She doesn't know if it's literal or not, but I think it is.
Okay.
It's one of her superpowers. And then somebody randomly gives her a hat, and she puts it on, and it makes her visible. And that gives her just enough confidence to talk to another girl who plays guitar and say, hey, you want to start a band? And that girl says, okay, I know a drummer. And the drummer knows somebody who could be a good backup singer. And before they know it, they're rehearsing and they're playing shows. And this invisible, friendless person is suddenly fronting a band, and she has friends, and she has superpowers.
And we can see her.
And she discovers that I'm overpowered, and if I try to act alone, I make trouble. But if I keep my friends around me, and in the second book, she puts together a team, she discovers, oh, other people have weird powers. Maybe we should be working together. And she's actually mentoring them, which she thinks is really strange because she doesn't think of herself as a leader. But she is. And with this group, they can actually accomplish things and make things better. In the Daughter of Magic trilogy, the main character is not invisible and not at all shy and has lots of friends, but she's very impulsive and tries to go at her on her own and makes a mess. But when she has her friends to go, oh, maybe we should think about this, she does better, and she finds better ways to use her abilities that are helpful rather than destructive. And in the science fiction novel, it's about 12 people in a spaceship, and they have only themselves to rely on. So that's very much about collaboration and teamwork and leadership, but none of them can go it alone. They have to work together.
So there's a central theme that seems to go through all of them, that we're better together than we are alone.
Yep.
Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. I have to think about that. You know, and there's truth to that. I mean, when in business, it's always the teams always make the best. I think in social lives, I think people tend to want to be around friends, and I think people who have trouble making friends, I think, are envious of that capability to do so.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was it about your personal experiences then that compelled you to write in these particular themes?
Okay.
Let's get a little bit more into Karen.
The Daughter of Magic trilogy actually grew out of a previous series that I attempted to write decades ago. And that series grew out of a very brief dream that I had. Interesting. That on second look, I realized was Star Wars fanfic in dream form, but it was this very short little scene of these two wizards who had been in conflict but were now working together, or were they? And there were several plot twists and all this stuff, and I woke up and thought, that was weird. And I told my husband about it, and he says, that sounds like something that could be in a fantasy novel. Which I had never attempted to write. And so I wrote a book, and then I wrote a sequel, and then I wrote another book to go between those two books, and then I wrote a fourth book to go between those books.
3 books.
So now I had a 4-book series, but it was really ramshackle and kind of unpublishable. But it gave me this character.
Gave you the
and
character.
I thought, oh, okay, now I kind of know what I'm doing. I will, on purpose, write for young adults with a teenage character and make it a little more coherent as a book. And so a whole trilogy came out of that, and actually now I'm polishing up that old series now that I know how to write. And the first book of that will be coming out later this year.
Excellent,
excellent.
So you're actually going to, I was going to say, they weren't necessarily practice books, they were just pre-published.
They were just not ready yet because I didn't know what I was doing. And all of them have a setting that's based on the area where I grew up, and then, and other parts of the Pacific Northwest. It's not set in the Pacific Northwest, but it's set in a made-up place that's a lot like the Pacific Northwest. So there's
Rainy?
There's the rainy foresty part, and there's the semi-arid sagebrush part, and there's the mountains, and there's the seacoast, and all of that fed into them. And then the superhero series grew out of me. In my 50s, I was playing in a garage band and wearing hats. And so I've decided, well, hey, what if a teenager started wearing hats and then started a band and then got superpowers? And that's set in Seattle, so,
Okay.
all the neighborhoods I know appear in the book. So everything in it is fictional, but everything in it kind of grew out of my experiences, thinking, well, what would it have been like if I had done these things when I was a teenager?
Okay, so I'm getting part of this. I'm certainly getting the familiarity part of the location. And actually, it's one of the reasons I ask, because I think it's so important for authors to write part of themselves into the books. And I don't know how authors cannot do that.
Yeah, you can't keep it out.
And particularly for prolific authors, how they basically, that part of themselves morphs through character to character. So I'm hearing that there's a lot of your characters that really are based on your home ground, your roots here in Seattle, your bases here in the Northwest. But I'm hearing that your teenage characters came out of your experiences in your 50s.
Kind of. It was
A little bit,
like
okay.
I was doing the things in my 50s that I wanted to have been doing in my teens and 20s. But it
A
was
late
like,
bloomer?
okay, well, what if I had been a teenager now, doing the things I'm doing now? Wouldn't that be interesting? But I could, I had the experience of rehearsing with a band and going on stage and playing and starting to write songs and all of that. And I thought, ooh, okay, what if this 16, 17, 18-year-old character is doing these things
Had that kind of confidence.
and also has superpowers?
Yeah, okay.
So what kind of superpowers would I want? And so I gave some of them to her.
Got it. That's fun. So interesting. So you're kind of reliving your childhood in a sense.
Rewriting it,
Yeah.
making it more interesting.
I'm cooler now than I was then.
I'm
Yeah.
way cooler now than I was then.
Yeah, I think a lot of us can relate to that. If I could only go back and redo my teenage years the way I think now. I love it when Stephen Colbert basically gets on television and basically puts up that one picture of him as a teenager with his braces to basically remind us, yeah, we weren't as cool then as we think we were.
I didn't even think I was then.
Yeah.
I was not.
Well, how do you choose? All your books take place at the same time. You have different characters. Are any of them what would you call like caricatures, or do you really think that there's sort of a reality based in each of them?
I try not to write caricatures,
Okay.
although I think some of my bad guys are a little more that way. But I try to really fill out the characters, even the minor characters. I'll think about, well, okay, I have this beautiful rich girl. What's her deal? Oh, she has family troubles, and she has anxiety, and she has an eating disorder, and she was a bully because she was bullied by her older sister. Oh, okay, because I thought she was going to be the villain.
Reminds me of
And
most
it
of the
turned
rich
out,
girls I
no,
knew.
she's
Yeah.
an ally.
Okay.
And, and was a really fun character to write because she was so different from my experience. And, she's just a very popular, beautiful girl, the cheerleader, all of these things. And she walks through life with a great deal of confidence, but inside, not so much.
Not so much. Okay.
So
Interesting.
That's just an example of one side character who turned out to have a lot more going on than I thought. And okay, that's how you make a character real. You make them complicated.
Yeah, I think people, we all want to find flaws in other people. And because I think it helps us feel more comfortable identifying flaws in ourselves and figuring out how to deal with them. And I think that unflawed characters, not only drive me nuts, but definitely make you want to think about high school. Those people that seem like they didn't have any flaws, but probably were full of them.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So what is it that you would, if your audience is going to walk away, what is it that you want your audience your reader to walk away from after they finish your book?
Well, if they're a teenager, I want them to have the sense that this is just the beginning. It's going to get better. High school ends, and you have strengths and superpowers, maybe. You have your own magic that you maybe don't even know about yet, but it's there, and it will make itself known if you let it. Trust it, and don't feel like you have to peak in high school. You can peak later. It's fine.
Yeah, and I don't think in high school we understood that. I think everyone was looking at high school like that was our peak.
Yeah.
I don't think many of us realized that would probably be a low point. It would get better. Now, do any of your books involve any sort of sexual situations or profanity or anything like that?
This one especially has lots of profanity.
Okay.
And this one has a little bit because it's contemporary teenagers.
Teenagers, yeah.
And especially one of them, she uses F-bombs as armor. So it's part of her protective thing. And she introduced herself with one, and I was like, okay, I guess this is how this character talks. So there's a lot of profanity in those two. The fantasy series, especially the middle book, has some sensuality, I would call it. And, nothing graphic, but it's very clearly what's going on is somebody is having a sexual experience.
Okay.
And it affects her relationships and how she thinks about things, and kind of drips over into the third book. But it's mostly in the second book. And then Ego and Endurance is for adults. Funnily enough, there's less profanity. There's some, but there's less than in the YA books. And again, there's some sensuality because it's a rom-com on the spaceship.
Okay.
And so there's flirting, and there's a
always suspected
little
that.
steaminess and stuff like that. Again, not graphic, but if you know, you know.
You put boy and girl astronauts together and things are going to happen.
Yep.
Yeah, there you go. Now, do you have a process? I like to ask authors about their process, and because everyone, and it's informative for me, and I think it's informative for other authors and readers about how different authors go about the process of discovering a new story, discovering the characters, and then writing it out.
I have a messy process. And it's maybe less messy than it used to be. I'm not really sure. When I first started, I would just jump in and start writing at a point and see where I ended up. Now I'm a little more organized about it. I will have the initial idea, and I'll start making notes about anything that might happen in the book. And then I'll take those notes and try to put them in an order. The events could happen in this order, and it could involve these characters. And then once I have that, so it's a very sketchy synopsis, kind of a roadmap. And then I just start writing and discover what the story really is. But the roadmap helps me keep moving from event to event so I can get a draft. Because what I found was it was taking me a really long time and a lot of struggle just to write the first draft. And then the real writing would happen in the revision. So I figure if I can get the draft done quickly, then I can do the fun part of shaping it into a real book. And going, oh, okay, so this event should really happen earlier, and this should happen much later. And, oh, I know, that unnamed side character who showed up in one scene is actually this important character who comes in later, and so on and so forth, until I have it pretty well shaped into a book-like thing.
Yeah. No, I understand. That's why I asked. I think it's important. Now, do you write every day? You mentioned you have 4 new books or a whole new series coming along.
I try to write pretty much every day, rarely for more than about an hour, which is something I discovered a long time ago when my kids were little, that if I negotiated with them one summer, said, okay, you're both home, we're going to do stuff, but I have a book I need to write. So I get one uninterrupted hour every day to work on my book. And by the end of the summer, I had a draft.
Okay.
And that was eye-opening. You can get a lot done in an hour if that's all the time you have.
If you're focused.
And so sometimes now I will write for longer than that, but it's rarely more than an hour or two because I run out of steam, run out of ideas, run out of words.
Yeah, I think it depends on the phase of writing that I'm at. I think during the creative phase, you do have to kind of do it in spurts. I think in the editing phase, you can kind of where the story's pretty much there, and you're just massaging and moving around and cleaning. I think it's a little easier to go longer spurts, but I think everyone's a little different. So we only have time for maybe one last question, but you were one of the earliest members to the Author Event Network. So you've been with us for about 2.5 years. So I wanted to just get your impression of AEN and what that's meant to you in terms of your writing career and what you like most, maybe least about it.
I've really enjoyed going out to the events and selling. At first, I didn't think I'd be able to do it, but I discovered, it's just talking to people about books. I can do that. And especially if somebody comes up to our booth and they're saying, I love fantasy, or I love science fiction, or, this looks like a superhero book. They're already interested.
Yeah.
So, and then to be able to talk to the author face to face, for some people, that's kind of a big deal. And so I love giving them that attention and talking about what they're interested in, and then hopefully they'll decide to buy a book or 3. And last year I sold more books that way than through all the other methods.
Yeah.
I think a little more than half of my sales were direct face-to-face at events. So it's been very successful for me.
Excellent.
It can be a long day.
Yeah.
And some events are not as successful, and so you're kind of just standing around talking with each other. But most of them have been really good, and I've had the very fun experience of having somebody run up and say, I bought your book at another event and I read it in 2 days, or my friend gave me your trilogy and I loved it. Are there going to be more? Yeah. And that is just so encouraging and meaningful and fun.
It is. Well, thank you so much. And you know what? I think a lot of us are having that experience, and I think that's one of the great things that makes AEN such a fun group to be with is that real personalized experience from the reader, and you realize you're actually having an impact with people.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Karen, for coming. I'm so excited to be able to do this interview with you. I know it's been working with you for a couple of years. You're always such a joy to have in the tent and the booth with us, and thank you so much for joining us. And thank you for watching Meet the Author. Come to meet all of the AEN authors during the summer season of 2024. We're going to be in Seattle and in Portland. Keep on reading.